Hello, and welcome to this informational video, which provides a summary of key information that will guide you as you prepare to administer the Government Performance and Results Act, or GPRA, Client Outcome Measures tool with clients you're working with. This video will provide a summary overview to help you become familiar with the GPRA tool and the basics of its implementation. More details are provided in the GPRA question-by-question instruction guide available online at the GPRA website. It's important to look at the GPRA question-by-question instruction guide before administering the tool to clients. The GPRA tool is divided into 8 different sections. These consist of A, record management, which includes a specific demographics section that you only ask clients at baseline or intake. B, substance use and planned services. C, living conditions. D, education, employment, and income. E, legal. F, mental and physical health problems and treatment and recovery. And G, social connectedness. While all of these sections are important, this video will focus on providing targeted guidance for specific sections that ask about sensitive information, including Section B, Section F, and Section G. Let's begin by discussing the different components of the GPRA tool for you to be aware of. These are components that can apply to one or more questions throughout all 8 sections of the GPRA tool. Many questions of the GPRA tool have multiple different components to them, such as parts that you should or shouldn't read out loud to clients, how you should mark client responses to questions, whether or not you should skip any questions depending on how clients have responded to past questions, and whether the questions listed should be answered by clients or by grantee staff. In this video, we'll describe what each of these components mean and give examples of them. Please keep in mind that because every question is unique and one or more of these components may apply to each question, it's important to review the details for each question in the GPRA question-by-question instruction guide before you administer the GPRA tool with clients for the first time. At the beginning of each section, there are instructions as to whether the questions are to be answered by the client or if they're to be completed by the grantee staff. Please do not read questions to the client that are to be collected by the grantee staff. Have the client answer all the questions where client response is indicated. Read each question as it's written. In certain cases, the item in parentheses or all caps or brackets may or may not be read to the client. If a client's having trouble understanding a question, you may explain it to the client to help its understanding. However, please do not change the wording of the question. You should read response categories that appear in lowercase or sentence case lettering. If all the response categories are in capital letters, that means you should ask the question open-ended. In other words, don't read the responses, but instead let the client answer and then mark which response the client indicates. Please note that the GPRA tool provides written instructions for exceptions to this rule. For example, here on the slide, we can see questions 3 and 4 in Section F, mental and physical health problems and treatment and recovery. For question 3, we would only read the response categories in lowercase letters, so not at all, slightly, moderately, considerably, and so on. If the client doesn't report any mental health complaints within the last 30 days, you would mark the response category in all caps that says no reported mental health complaints in the past 30 days. If the client refuses to answer a question marked refused on the tool where available, such as in question 3 here. For items where the response options are read to the client, don't offer refused as a response option, meaning you shouldn't read the refused out loud. This option should be client generated only. So if a client doesn't know the answer to a question after you or another staff member explains it, or they refuse to answer a question where refuse is not listed as a response option, then you should mark this by writing refused or don't know on the paper version. The same process should be followed if a question within the GPRA tool is accidentally missed or skipped and cannot be asked of the client. Some sections of the GPRA tool have skip patterns. This means that depending on how clients answer a question, you may or may not have to skip over some of the following questions. We can see an example of that here on this slide, which displays question 5 and 5A from section F. Here, you would ask the client the first part of the question, do you have medical or health insurance? And provide the response options in lowercase letters, so yes or no. If a person answers no or refuses to answer the first part of question 5, you'd follow the instructions that say go to the next section. Remember, because this text is bracketed and in all caps, you wouldn't read that out loud to clients. Instead, you'd simply follow those instructions, skip over question 5A and go straight on to the next section, which is section G, social connectedness. If the client answers yes, then you would read question 5A and the response items here that are in lowercase letters and check off all that apply. Now we'll discuss the different sections of the GPRA tool. We'll give a very brief overview of sections A, C, D, and E in order to focus in more depth on sections B, F, and G, which ask clients about sensitive information. Many questions on the GPRA tool ask about sensitive information, specifically those in section B on substance use and plan services, in section F on mental and physical health problems in treatment and recovery, and in section G on social connectedness. These topics are difficult for many people to talk about and may even be emotionally painful just to think about or remember. And clients may shut down or become dysregulated if they're taken by surprise by the content of a sensitive question. Therefore, front-loading or giving clients an advanced warning about upcoming question content for these types of questions can help clients mentally prepare themselves to be asked about specific types of sensitive content. Make sure to read the questions ahead of time to familiarize yourself with specific details. The more prepared you are and the more confident you feel, the more you'll be able to convey a sense of groundedness and competency to the client, which in turn can help them feel more safe and encourage them to reveal sensitive information. The first section is section A, record management. There are two subsections, record management and record management demographics. Grantee program staff complete the tool's first subsection, record management, so please don't ask the client questions from this subsection. You can ask clients questions from the second subsection, record management demographics, but only at baseline or intake. Section B covers substance use and planned services. This section contains items to measure alcohol and other substance use in the past 30 days, substance use and mental health diagnoses, receipt of FDA-approved medications to treat alcohol, opioid, tobacco, and stimulant disorders, overdose and treatment history, and an administrative section regarding planned grant-funded services provided to the client. For questions which ask about the past 30 days, ask specifically about behavior in the past 30 days. Please don't say in the past month as a substitute. This may lead to confusion and inaccurate responses. It may be helpful to front load this whole section by letting clients know you'll be asking questions about how much and how often they consume alcohol and different types of substances, as well as any mental health diagnosis it may have been given, any experiences of overdosing on or overusing alcohol or other substances and subsequent treatment experiences, as well as any general inpatient or outpatient treatment experiences they may have had over the course of their life in relation to alcohol or substance use. For question 1 and 1B, you'll first ask the client, during the past 30 days, how many days have you used any substance? If the client can't report substances on their own, you should then read the list of substances in the table. For example, during the past 30 days, how many days have you used? We'll look at number 1A here, alcohol. If they report that they've used, if they report at least 1 day of use, you should then ask, how do you take the substance? And then read the different options for B over here, which is the route. So 1 would be oral, 2 intranasal, 3 vaping, 4 smoking, 5 non-intravenous or IV injection, 6 intravenous or IV injection, etc. If the response to A, which is the number of days used, is 0, then you skip section B, which is the route. For questions 2 through 5, the intent of these questions is to understand if the client's been diagnosed with, we'll say for question 2, it would be an alcohol use disorder. For question 3, they ask about an opioid use disorder. For question 4, a stimulant use disorder, and you can't see it here, but question 5, a tobacco use disorder, And for all of these questions, if the answer is yes, you'll need to ask about which FDA medications the client received prior to treatment, meaning before baseline or intake, and at follow-up and discharge by the grantee directly. If the client reports a diagnosis, read the 4 different medication types associated with each diagnosis for each question, such as alcohol use disorder, and indicate the client's response for which ones were received in the past 30 days. For any medications received, indicate how many days or doses they received the medication. If the client did not receive a medication in the past 30 days or don't report ever having been given the relevant diagnosis, you check the appropriate response category and move on to the next question. For questions 6 through 9, the set of questions ask clients about whether they've overdosed or taken too much of a substance and what services they may have received in response, such as emergency department care, inpatient facility treatment, Narcan, etc. Make sure to read the questions ahead of time, including a review of the GPRA question-by-question instruction guide to familiarize yourself with specific details. You can front-load these questions by saying, the next few questions I'll be asking you has to do with any time you may have taken too much of any substance and what happened afterwards in terms of any treatment or care you received. Questions 10 and 10A. These items ask clients about whether they've ever been diagnosed with a mental health illness by a healthcare professional, and if so, which ones? Later in the survey in section F, the client will be asked about additional questions regarding their experience of any mental health challenges. You can front load this by saying, a lot of people who come to see us have been diagnosed with a mental health illness. The next few questions I'll be asking you has to do with any mental health illness diagnosis you may have received. Right now, we'll just focus on mental health illness diagnoses, and later on, I'll be asking you more about the symptoms you may experience and any treatment you may have received. Questions 11, 11A, and 11B should be answered by the grantee staff only, so please don't read these to clients. Section C covers living conditions and asks clients about their current source of housing and whether anyone they lived with has used alcohol or substances over the past 30 days. Section D covers education, employment, and income, and asks clients about any current enrollment or school or job training programs, about their highest level of education they've obtained, about their current employment status, and about their sense of financial security and their personal annual income. Section E covers legal issues and asks clients about any recent arrests and pending charges, trials, or sentencing, their current status regarding parole, probation, or intensive pretrial supervision, and their current participation in any drug court programs or deferred prosecution agreements. Next, we come to Section F, which covers mental and physical health problems and treatment and recovery. This section asks clients about their overall quality of life, mental and physical health concerns, any treatment experiences in the last 30 days, and medical and health insurance. It may be helpful to front load this whole section by letting clients know that you'll be asking about mental health diagnoses and symptoms of distress, as well as about any recent suicidal thoughts and behaviors. In addition to what we cover in this video, please make sure to read the GPRA question-by-question instruction guide for detailed guidance on each of these questions. For question 1, the intent is to determine how the client perceives their quality of life. If the client asks what's meant by quality of life, please explain that it's a subjective concept that includes both positive and negative aspects of life, including everything from physical and mental health, social functioning, family, education, employment, wealth, religious beliefs, and the community environment surrounding the client. For question 2, the intent is to determine the number of days in the past 30 that the clients experienced any serious psychiatric symptoms. You should ask about each psychiatric symptom separately and enter the number of days that the client has experienced that symptom. The answer cannot be more than 30 days. You should enter 0 in days if the client reports that they've not experienced the condition or symptom. Select refused if the client refuses to answer or provides no response. Please note, if a client reports 1 or more days in response to any of the questions from 2A through 2F, please refer clients to the 6MFU GPRA client resource list on the GPRA website. The 6MFU GPRA client resource list on the GPRA website provides information about important local resources like housing, mental health treatment, substance use disorder treatment, etc. Please keep in mind that there's numerous options for these lists on the GPRA website based on the locations of clients at the 6MFU GPRA point. So please be sure to use the list that applies to the city and county where the client you're working with lives. If a client responds one or more to question 2F, indicating number of suicide attempts in the last 30 days, you should make a mental note of this and continue administering the rest of the GPRA survey. And then, importantly, when you're finished, please be sure to refer the client to additional mental health services. You can refer to the services listed in the 6MFU GPRA client resource list on the GPRA website. And please, very importantly, also make sure they know that they can call or text the 988 National Suicide and Crisis Hotline any time of day, 24/7, to receive free and confidential support for any time they feel suicidal or in a state of distress. For question 3, the intent is to record the client's feelings about how bothersome the previously mentioned psychological or emotional problems have been in the past 30 days. It may be helpful to remind the client to respond to whatever problems they identified in question F2. You can ask follow-up questions to probe the client further if they report a serious condition but say they weren't bothered at all by it. For question 4, the intent is to indicate where the client received medical care in the past 30 days. For question 5 and 5A, the intent is to record if the client has medical or health insurance, and if so, what type. We've now come to section G, which covers social connectedness. This section asks clients about any voluntary participation in peer-led support groups for recovery, any interactions with their family and friends who support their recovery, their satisfaction with personal relationships, and any desire to change interpersonal relationships or places that negatively impact their recovery. It may be helpful to front-load this whole section by letting clients know that you'll be asking about their personal relationships and things they do that support their recovery, and any changes they may want to make about people and places that negatively impact their recovery. In addition to what we cover in this video, please, as always, make sure to read the GPRA question-by-question instruction guide for detailed guidance on each of these questions. For question 1, the intent is to measure whether clients have attended non-professional, peer-oriented mutual support groups to assist in their recovery in the past 30 days. The client doesn't have to be in quote-unquote recovery to attend these types of groups. A peer-operated organization is one in which the person or people who facilitate the group are not there as paid professionals, but rather are peers and/or members of the group. For question 2, the intent is to measure whether clients have a social support network outside of a treatment or recovery support network. An interaction may be viewed as supportive and non-supportive at the same time, depending on one's perspective. Therefore, the creators of the GPRA tool recommend that you clarify the question by saying to the client that another way of thinking about what they're being asked is, in the past 30 days, have you spent time with people who are supportive of your recovery, including family and friends? For question 3, the intent is to determine how satisfied the client is with their personal relationships, which can include relationships with family, friends, a significant other, and work colleagues, but ultimately the term is left to the client's interpretation. And for question 4, the intent is to determine if the client realized that they have to change their social connections or places due to their recovery. After completing this question, you should refer to the GPRA question-by-question instruction guide, which will provide additional instructions on the next steps you need to take before completing the GPRA survey tool. And speaking of completion, this brings us to the end of our overview video for using the GPRA tool with clients. Please remember to review the GPRA question-by-question instruction guide for further details in order to be as prepared as you can be to convey a sense of safety, groundedness, and competency when you administer this tool with clients. We hope you found the information in this video helpful, and we wish you all the best as you gain experience administering the GPRA survey tool with your clients.